Redditors who left companies that non-stop talk about their amazing culture. What was the cringe moment that made you realize you had to get out? This is what the woman who interviewed me said. Here at Cheapskate Architects we don't often do all-nighters for our customers, but when we do, it's a real pizza party. Also we don't pay overtime, we do it for the love. And your wage is $22K even though you are an architect. And also I won't be there because I'm HR management because I'm married to the director. Yes, we need an hour depth even though there's 3 employees. It's a real pizza party. Also we don't pay overtime. And your wage is $22K. Dude, I make more than that to deliver those pizzas part-time. We had a problem with the client and the boss dumped all of the blame on a 24-year-old woman who was basically his most loyal employee. He made her cry in front of the client, as if that would somehow help save the relationship. How to turn a dedicated hard worker into a why bother worker 101 right there. A co-worker was forced to work while her mother was dying in hospice. Mom dies, she quits. They escort her off the premises like a criminal. One of my team leads called me while my dad was in hospice to ask me to start a new project and I told her to frick off and she could talk to my boss. She did. My boss told her in a nice way to frick off. When my boss planned an office day trip to a car show and brewery, then only invited the guys in the office. Even worse, when one of the women said we should all go he said no, but why don't you girls have a spa day instead? He also put on a hella xenophobic accent whenever he talked about his many Asian clients. Obviously there were other issues but those two stand out. Go frick yourself, Tony. When working at a shoe shop, assistant supervisor was assessing people's performances. He came to me and said, Zalesnikov, you greeted the customer well, so I am giving you a big, smiley face, and marked it on his checklist. But the customer didn't buy any shoes, so I am just gonna mark that as a I got my 50% employee discount on my shoes and just walked away into the sunset to never go back. They changed the title of the receptionist to Director of First Impressions. For everyone asking, it's a tiny company in the Midwest. For your information, they got that idea from the book The Big Five for Life by John Strelacki. One of its themes is how one can be a good manager and names like that one are suggested so the person feels important. When attending a management retreat and was pressured into buying charity raffle tickets I couldn't afford, $20. The 2 people who won before me donated their winnings to the same charity they bought the raffle tickets from. They were middle management P-match people who make $100 K plus. I made $32 K. With a young daughter, I won a drawing for $400. I literally had nausea for 2 days trying to figure out how I was going to pay my bills after my job had just moved the goalposts on some sales performance bonuses I had coming my way, dropping it effectively from $1,000 to $200. Now I'm the butthole who's going to keep the money I won. Guess I'm not a team player. Bonus. This was 4 hours drive from home. Had an overnight stay, and one of those middle management fricks in an example of what should be on or off the clock said we shouldn't be paid for the drive to the retreat. Frick you. I was on the clock from the time I left Friday until I got home Sunday. If you're forcing me to be somewhere as part of my job, it's all on the clock. My district manager didn't like that, and I was already looking for the door. Pizza Hut. Where will Pizza Hut take you? During the interview I was told the work is hard but we feel like a family and we can always be about the bad customers after a shift. The people there were horrible. The managers made you do 2 people's jobs for less money. I was paid minimum wage for my age, $4.00 an hour, and the company purposely brought on 16-year-olds for that reason. I was also told that they didn't have enough money to pay me so my shift was cancelled. I was told I'd be paid to complete my training, and I wasn't. Our manager would fling the corks of Prosecco bottles at the waitresses to make them scared. There would be regular breakdowns from cooks and waiters. I would regularly get screamed at in front of the whole restaurant for silly things like the knives and forks not being straight enough, even though they would leave me by myself, as in, I was the only waiter still working. 1 week after my first shift, the waitresses would always be about the other people in the restaurant, and would shout at me for asking questions. Even on my first day. At one point an outside chef was brought in from a different restaurant and he didn't realize he had to wash up cutlery because he doesn't have to as his place. That's an entirely separate job. So we ran out of cutlery and the two more experienced waitresses, instead of helping me and washing up the cutlery or teaching me how to do it myself, would just hoard the cutlery, so it was me that would run out. Then my manager would have another go at me. Frick that place. At that point, I just quit as soon as I was the last waiter left. That joint can just bleed out. Not my problem if an entire job of theirs is suddenly just gone with no one left to do it. I guess they'd find someone to hire soon enough, but for the time being, they'd be in trouble due to a lack of employees. My last job was for a large cinema chain. The incentive of working there was free movies and great culture with the colleagues. This seemed great on paper. There were 5 pillars of the company, a newish thing since they were bought out, one of them being fun. Now I worked at one of the largest branches in the company, with 50-ish employees at the time. Every morning before we opened the doors, the managers made us huddle together like a football team and gave us our morning pep talk. Alright guys, listen up. Today is going to be great. We've got the new X movie and whoever sells the most of Y promotional item gets a free soda drink. Woo. Go go go. It's going to be amazing. Can you top this week's record for best reviews? Whoever gets the most good reviews today gets a free popcorn. Whoa, man. I hated it so much. No one cared, but they preached this speech at the beginning of every shift change despite every single employee being completely deadpan. It was like a school care worker trying to get adults to play bricks and build the tallest tower. Awful. I worked in a call center for one for the Big Four. My personal moment was when I got my $2000 bonus withheld. I was 22, so it wasn't chump change, because I had to stop taking calls and answer our new hires questions. My bosses would be here for 4 hours at a time and people needed help. I figured it showed initiative and also kept the operation moving along since I was one of the top 10 reps they had. I was mistaken. When I was bullied into working 76 hours a week because they could find other managers to cover the shifts, but when I went on stress leave they miraculously managed to get all my hours covered with no one else working over 38 hours. CEO of a crappy startup took away our working from home privileges, while he continues to never show up to the office. My boss came up with a campaign called Smovers, Smile and Move. We needed to be Smovers and encourage other associates to be happier that they worked for a dead-end retail corporate job. He gave us bracelets to wear and little cards to keep on our person at all time. Like, we worked at a crappy timeshare property, with owners who owned part of a small, independent timeshare in the early 2000s that was bought out by a huge hotel conglomerate that destroyed the entire aesthetic of what they originally invested into. So these are embittered, hateful people always wanting refunds for silly crap like a broken treadmill in the gym. Literally had a grown butt man, followed by his wife an hour later, yelling, raise voices in the lobby, at my young visibly pregnant self because a lifeguard moved their towel from their beach chair after they left for 2 hours to take a nap in their room. On the 4th of July while we're at full capacity LOL. On top of the daily emails reminding us that working for Wyndham was the best choice we've ever made in life. And constant reminders from upper management what our mission in life, your life's purpose, the reason you were born was to reason on a daily basis with unreasonable garbage humans as hard as you can until they give us a 5 on their surveys. I declined all requests for transfers and just got out as fast as I could. Just smile and move, boys. Smile and move. It was for a moment, and when interviewing more people I'd get to remark on their culture fit. Usually not, because then they started hiring people from large organizations who had single mindset one-track minds and it became like Office Space. They started adding unnecessary tiers, positions for non-existent work, etc. Usually above existing positions, so there was no lateral moving in the company. Go pro, you suck. When I was promoted multiple times into roles requiring much more skill and knowledge, but my salary actually got smaller because my work wasn't sales oriented and therefore not making the company any money directly. This is at a multi-million-dollar company, where most of the employees don't work in sales. We had a compulsory team building evening. When I asked why, I was told because the staff handbook said we had to. 40% of the staff were interns, so they were forced to spend their own money on a corporate night out every month. That's so ridiculous. The company should pay for everything if it's compulsory. Used to work for good old Home Depot before their most recent CEO change. They had a great culture and meaningful values that they actually did something with. Wait, what? Everything was all about helping others. We even had monthly volunteer days where employees would do home improvement or charity projects for people in need. For example, a local couple's house burned down. We built them an entirely new workshop garage and completely stocked it with tools. Our motto was make it right, and we did. Then the change happened, and suddenly managers were being relocated, canned, etc. While the entire company's focus became money, we stopped doing projects for others. Our charity programs dwindled to shadows of their former glory. The only charity left is personal donations from the employees. No more service provided by the company. I stuck it out for 2 years before I finally decided it wasn't worth it and left. I worked at Outback. The amount of team meetings and mandatory enthusiasm was ridiculous. I was given the chance to backpack across Europe with some friends for about 3 weeks one summer. I told my manager and she goes 3 weeks? I don't know. You'll really have to work hard up until then and then I'll let you know if you can take that time off. I straight up told her it's not if you let me go. It's if you still let me work here when I get back. Yeah, when I got back I immediately started looking for new jobs. When I worked at Staples I had an opportunity to go to Ireland for a month. They let me go and held my job. Also let me take PTO, even as a part-time employee. That was 16 years ago and I am still grateful for the awesome management team there. When I was told, I can't put it in writing, but I am a man of my word. When my contract expired, suddenly there was no job for me. I was told by management that because I was part-time I had to work extra hours. Granted the money was good, but the exploitation wasn't fun. Frick Hilton and frick working in hotels. It can be truly rewarding at times, but it's mostly 12-hour days working to please idiots. When I got a warning for coming into work without our company credo mission statement pamphlet inside my lanyard, we had name tags about the size of a playing card on a lanyard with a slot in the back specifically for wearing the credo near our hearts at all times. When a ceiling tile fell, soaking wet with pee, right next to me in the first floor dining room, and the 2 employees to my side simultaneously said, again. I had just finished a 108-hour week because a server got hacked. The server in question was one I warned them about and said it was vulnerable and we also had no contingency plan if it went down. But a 5K server just wasn't in the budget, which we ended up getting when it got compromised anyways. So I go in and ask for some comp time. Since I'm salaried, they told me I could leave at 2-3 hours early on a Friday sometime. Things turned out good though. I left for a job with better pay and I'm still there 4 years later. I just worked a 60-hour week due to a deadline, but of my own accord. No one said I had to. My boss told me to take Friday off and not use any PTO on his own initiative. I didn't even ask for it. They're bragging about how they had 30+ people willing to replace me and then showing the file with the applications after I refused to take a longer lunch to cut my overtime. Got hired on that the company treats everyone like family and everyone has each other's backs. You're allowed to call out 6 times in a year period before termination, which is reasonable. When trying to acquire an aider to accommodate for days missed due to an illness, my manager tried to talk me out of getting it, saying it would look bad on my part. Went through the steps of getting the aider and then got threatened with termination for missing days because my calling off clearly wasn't related to my illness. Called out my manager for not working with my accommodation. He just shrugged and said that sometimes getting fired builds character. Being sued for discrimination builds character too. When they got super modern futons so people who work all night and sleep in the office finally had an actual place to sleep, they made a big deal about it, like it was so cool and nice of them. All they were doing was encouraging more people to sleep in the office. Management consulting. People, due to the work lifestyle, tend to be in a bubble of co-workers who are young, 20s, and financially successful, therefore a bit disconnected from the world in terms of its problems and suffering. They advertise a lot of progressive work environment thinking, but on the actual job site it's the same business corporate environment. Tons of overtime. Just say yes. Paying your dues. You're constantly talking up and kowtowing. There was also this dumb but statistic that gets constantly paraded. Since the hire-to-applicant rate is lower than Harvard's acceptance rate, therefore it is harder to get hired here than it is to get into Harvard, and you're more elite than Harvard. Companies love to say this, but this is true of a huge number of businesses. I worked for a small company and found out 2 weeks and their entire business model was based on theft. The owner later went to prison long after I left. My family had hooked me up with the job because they said this guy was so great and so successful. It didn't help matters that he was a completely mean person. He'd harass employees. One day he did an unplanned impromptu roast and poked fun at the receptionist's weight. That did not go over well. He was literally like Michael Scott without any of the charm. I didn't have my CPA license yet, but I had some accounting experience from college, so I was able to get FO relatively quickly. I put in my resignation and my family was P. But C. They didn't know about the fraud aspect. They thought I was being irresponsible. When he was later hauled into federal court on criminal charges, they still defended him, but at least they understood. When we aired an advert showing the people buying our products as anthropomorphized animals, upper management called everyone in on our days off and paid to gather around and watch this masterpiece of advertising before it was shown to the public. At the end, we all just looked at each other, horrified, until one brave soul raised a hand and asked, "So we're saying that our customers all subhuman, filthy animals?" There were a few oh crap looks, but nothing more was said. Someone must have agreed because the adverts didn't last long. Keep your mouth shut and let it run. There's nothing better than watching upper management swing from their own rope. I didn't exactly leave because of it, but in one of my previous jobs the boss would occasionally have these meetings which was all about motivation. Basically PPT presentations of inspiring quotes about teamwork and drive and all that crap. You would think it was in good intention, but it was hard for us to take it seriously when we found out he was stealing from his own company. Money that was supposed to go into the company was going into his pocket, and it didn't help that it seemed like he just expected us to suddenly work with more motivation just because he showed us that motivational presentation. There was not even some speech from his part. He'd just show us the presentation and that's it. Like, what the frick are you expecting us to just jump up with joy or something? The work environment was chill. There were no politics or negative work environment. But when you know the boss is taking you for granted and trying to put up a not so good facade on the crap he is pulling, you would want to get out ASAP. Worked for a hospital that was going through a culture change. They brought in a management group to help them get in better financial shape, and what was their first recommendation? Cut nursing staff and pay. Within 90 days we lost 10% of our nurses. We were struggling to legally and safely take care of patients. Meanwhile, the management team and the senior management went on a 2-week trip to the Caribbean, all paid for by the hospital. Flights, food, rooms, alcohol, all of it. I came into work that next morning after discovering that and saw an email saying the 4 nursing jobs I needed filled were denied due to budget costs. I pride myself in being level-headed and rational when I'm angry or frustrated, but that was enough. I know that cutting some of their benefits wasn't going to save the hospital, but you led by example. I never opened the email, as the info was in the subject line, and I called the local newspaper about 5 minutes later. I set up an interview with a journalist and told him to bring a big notebook. I resigned after making sure that my staff had their vacations approved and their bonuses, if any, were locked in to be paid. I did everything possible to help my unit out, and then I just sort of left. I left the key to my office with my resignation letter in HR. They called and offered to keep me, and I told them it would cost 4 new nurses. I never heard back. Spoke with the reporter 2 or 3 times after that and told them everything. I told them exactly what the community was paying for on a daily basis. He dropped a small story that eventually grabbed some serious attention. I know from some former employees that a lot of people were forced out over that. A few had to stand in court for minor monetary charges, and one was charged with embezzlement. They were in serious trouble after that, and eventually a bigger entity bought them up. Supposedly things are doing much better now, and those that rode it out went through some serious hard times. I don't know how or why they stayed. The funny part was that new culture program was never implemented. They paid a ton of money for it and never even opened the box. After 12 years at a company that actually did have an amazing culture for the first 10 years I was there, I see the new CFO and some other C-level clowns dump a shitload of options that caused a $2 drop in the stock. A couple days later at a town hall he said if you're not angry about the share price, you shouldn't be working here. I called him a fuckwit, walked out back to my desk and wrote my resignation. I worked for the cable company Shaw. They spent years talking about how they were better and how well they treated their employees. Then systematically changed all their policies because other companies are doing it. They basically took the list of things we were happy about and used it as a checklist of things to change. My manager told me that I wasn't getting a pay rise this year after killing it in my job. So I told her that I'll start applying for a new job immediately. She tried to pull the culture card but I said my job is staring at a screen for 8 hours a day. I really don't give a frick which building I'm doing it in or who sits next to me while I do it. A few days later I scored a 10k pay rise. Still consider other options. If Reddit bitching about their work has taught me one thing, it's if they don't give you a raise when you deserve it but rather as a last resort to keep you there are better jobs hiring. It was a union shop. Roughly 150 union employees and 50 company employees. The company always said how the people were their most important asset, yet they segregated themselves by having a Christmas party just for them. No union allowed. I'm unionized. Your local should at least try to put on events sometimes. Hold meetings in a bar, or just go out and party. Being in a union should come with a cultural component, and management can have their crap party. I was seen as the poor kid in the group because I hadn't been able to buy $600 worth of tools the first month. Come my first, and only, review it went something like this. Manager: okay, you haven't been able to afford the required toolkit, so that's worked against your performance review. Also you need to improve. Me: okay, what do you mean by improve? Manager: you just need to improve. Me: okay, I get that I need to improve. Like, what specifically is an example of that? Manager: we've tried pairing you with a variety of techs and they agree you need to improve. Me: okay, name a recent job where I could have improved. Manager: the generic name, contract. Me: alright, what specifically about that contract could I have improved on? Can I have an example? Manager: you just need to improve. Now I've already said that repeatedly now. You need to stop making me repeat myself. Me: oh, you're right, I agree, I think I do need to stop working here. I'm out. Oh, I've had the you're underperforming but we can't actually give any real specifics spiel before. It was always a junior manager feeling threatened by me and trying to oust me any way they could. Calling them out on it is the best, since they never expect it and choke on their own lies. When they did their own Harlem Shake video, well, after the meme was dead, I didn't leave right after that. But that was the moment that made me realize that maybe this company wasn't as hip and on top of trends as they claimed to be. Man, I love a good dead meme, but when companies start doing it, so much cringe. R&D tech startup company, constantly banging on about, work hard, play hard. They intimated that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded with pay increases. People who had been there 5 years hadn't seen a single penny increase. These same loyal workers, who got that company off the ground, were then forced out the door for cheaper alternatives when they complained about the situation. The CEO then proudly rocked up in a brand new Maserati that cost more than my freaking house. I noped out. I didn't get paid for the first month. Kept asking my manager about it and he said he was working on it. It just so happened the corporate offices were in our building a floor up. I wandered up there before my shift one day. This floor was fancy as frick with wooden doors and black marble everywhere. I found a random guy and explained my situation. He turned out to be the CFO. I got paid within the hour and my manager gave me mean looks after that. Unlimited vacation policy had fine print that it had to be max 2-week chunks. Birth of second baby was coming up, so I planned paternity leave and this detail came up. I got a bunch of pushback and finally settled on 2 weeks full away, plus 2 weeks half time. About the same time I hear from a co-worker who is planning a big trip to Europe for some festival, and she will be gone 3 weeks. I asked if she got any pushback about the VACA policy. Nope. So the lesson was attending a music festival is more important than fathering a newborn. If If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.